Although it may look like a mess of pieces, the Sun Cuboid is actually based on a simple concept. It is two separate 3x3s superimposed onto a single puzzle. That may seem familiar because it's actually the same concept as the Waterfall Cube. The difference is, the two 3x3s making up the Waterfall Cube are offset by 9 degrees, while for the Sun Cuboid they're offset by 45 degrees, which is the most you can have. Here's one 3x3, here's the other, and here's what it looks like if you combine them. The Sun Cuboid's inner circle is bandaged into a 1x1x3, so here's what it ends up looking like. Because both puzzles are made up of two superimposed 3x3s, I initially thought the Sun Cuboid might solve similarly to the Waterfall Cube. But when I tried it out for the first time, I actually realized that the two puzzles are completely different to solve. The Sun Cuboid was designed by Marcell Magori, and the files are available on Thingiverse if you'd like to print one for yourself. In today's video, I'll show you the Sun Cuboid's design, build, a demonstration, and finally a scramble and solve. There's timestamps for everything, and be sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in unique puzzles like this one. I'm getting ready to disassemble my Prusa Mark IV to put it into the official Prusa enclosure I bought last year. I printed a few puzzles beforehand just to have something to work on while the Prusa's out of service. Some of these will be my designs, others will not. The first two I printed were the Sun Cuboid and NK Cube's sliding 3x3. I asked you all which one you'd like to see first, and the Sun Cuboid won, so here we are. The Thingiverse page includes all the STLs for the parts, an STL for a sticker template if you want to hand cut stickers, and finally the Onshape document with the puzzle's design. The Onshape document turned out to be extremely useful later, as I used it to modify some parts and also design a sticker template. In general, when posting puzzle files publicly, it's really good practice to provide some kind of modifiable version of the parts, whether an Onshape document or even just step files. The description says the Sun Cuboid requires no supports, no glue, and no post-processing, which is pretty cool. I initially printed all the parts in Prusa Mint Galaxy Black PLA on my Prusa Mark IV, just from the STL files without any modifications, but I quickly noticed a few things that required taking a more in-depth look at the design. The Sun Cuboid has 3 layers, 2 outer layers and a central layer that is also exposed on both the top and bottom faces. The outer layers have a very simple hook into the central layer, and they all have flat bottoms, meaning you can print them without using any supports. Nice and clean design. On the other hand, I think the central layer takes the record for world's most complicated 1x1x3. It's actually hilarious. Let's start with the middle piece of the 1x1x3, which is typically the core. It's actually made up of 4 separate pieces, which I'll call the top, bottom, left, and right. Of course, top and bottom are identical, as are left and right. They all fit together pretty well, but this amalgamation would be functionally the same as a version with all of the parts combined. Moving on to the outer 1x1x3 parts, each one is made up of an identical left and right piece. They are held together by a 3D printed ring, which actually works pretty well. And finally, the left and right parts are held at the other end by a U-shaped cap. It's very tight, so I won't force it on right now. And you know what? This design technically works. It makes sense from one perspective, if you truly want to avoid all support material. In this case, the trade-off for avoiding supports is this ridiculous looking 1x1x3 design. While support material is not always fun to deal with, and it really depends on your printer, I'm typically fine with it as long as it's kept within reason. Even so, I was still going to use the Sun Cuboid design as it is, until I noticed one thing that was truly a deal breaker for me. It's this hole that the screw passes through. I noticed in the Onshape document that it only had a diameter of 2.8 millimeters, and that's just not enough. It probably works okay if you were to use a screw with a non-threaded section by the head, but my M3 screws have thread all the way up to the head. So at the very minimum, I would need to change that hole size for my purposes. But from the very beginning, it was clear that I need to do at least some amount of designing myself. Did you notice that the files don't include either a DXF sticker template or a core? The sticker template makes sense since Marcell hand cuts his stickers, so at the very least I'd need to design my own template. But the lack of a core might be confusing until you look at Marcell's assembly photo, where you can see him using a core that looks like it's from a mass-produced puzzle. It's not uncommon for FDM printed puzzle makers, especially in older times, to use a mass-produced core rather than designing one. I'm not in that camp, so I wanted to 3D print a core for the Sun Cuboid. There is one posted as a remix, but I didn't like it very much, so I decided to just design my own. So I made a copy of the Onshape document and began making the modifications. The core was simple. I just filled in the empty space in the central layer and added 2 screw holes. But when I was increasing the diameter of the screw hole on the outer piece, I thought to myself, does this really need to be split in half? Not really. So I combined them into a single part and cleaned up the fillets a little. I could have also combined the ring with this part, but I wasn't trying to redesign the puzzle substantially. At least this change, combined with increasing the screw hole diameter to 3.2 millimeters, definitely made the Sun Cuboid substantially less annoying to assemble. I printed my replacement parts, which did require some insignificant support material, and began post-processing and building the Sun Cuboid. I sanded all of the stickered faces with 220 grit sandpaper and then a nail file. I didn't sand any faces that were on the build plate of the printer since they were already very smooth. I then began assembling the Sun Cuboid, first checking how the inner 1x1x3 was turning. It was very smooth, so I unscrewed one of the outer combined parts and began inserting the outer layer parts with some loop. The outer layers came together without any issues, and I screwed the central layer together and made sure I had the tensions where I wanted them. The center caps are very tight on this, so I didn't want to have to take them off later. Once the Sun Cuboid was tensioned well, I put the caps on, and finally the puzzle was ready to be stickered. You might notice that I didn't sand the assembled puzzle with 2000 grit, and frankly I just forgot about that until a lot of the stickers were already on. The Sun Cuboid doesn't have any super small stickers, so I think it should be fine at this level of sanding. I designed the necessary sticker templates in my copy of the Onshape document and cut them on my Silhouette Cameo 3. Afterwards, I stickered the Sun Cuboid. I really like how the stickers turned out. I think they give the puzzle a nice and clean look. So how did the Sun Cuboid turn out? It turns pretty well. The vertical turns are very smooth, while the outer layers are a bit on the looser side, but are never a hassle to work with. The Onshape document's inclusion means that anyone can tailor the tolerances to their individual printer, which means there is less pressure on the provided STLs to have perfect clearances for what's realistically a wide variety of printers that the puzzle will be printed on. Marcell could have made the inner 1x1x3 circle not exposed in a central layer, but the central layer is a significant upgrade. One of my main complaints about the previous puzzle of Marcell's that I reviewed, the Crazy Split 1x2x3, was that turning the inner circle for every move was difficult and annoying. The central layer is much easier to grip on this puzzle, and in my opinion really makes the difference between the Sun Cuboid being actually usable or borderline unusable. If I were to personally design something like this, I'd do it Waterfall Cube style, with no circles on the outer faces, and the middle layer being 3x3 extensions. The 3x3 cuts do need to be spread pretty wide to get these specific pieces on the outer layers, so I'm unsure of what a Waterfall Cube style Sun Cuboid would actually look like. If you have the capacity to print this for yourself, I say go for it. The puzzle is fairly simple to put together and offers a unique solving experience. Would I pay the $120 for a pre-made copy? Probably not. You can get more interesting 3D printed puzzles for the same amount or even less money. From a solve perspective, the Sun Cuboid is honestly unlike anything I've ever solved, including the Waterfall Cube. I believe the cuts were based on the Sun Cube, but realistically those two puzzles also have nothing in common regarding the solves. So, let's find out what the Sun Cuboid is like to scramble and solve, right after this B-roll. be frank, the Sun Cuboid honestly solves like nothing else that I've solved. It's not super hard, and all the steps make sense, but it's also a very unique solving experience, so let me go over my basic strategy. Remember that there's only two types of pieces on the outer layers. There's these edges, and then there's these corners. So every other piece is the same. This piece, 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 and this piece are all mechanically identical. And then all of the two types of edges, this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece, etc., they're also all identical. Even though they are mirror images of each other, that doesn't matter, and they could actually still occupy each other's space. So that makes it interesting to solve this, because then you might think, okay, so does the shape even matter? And to varying degrees it does, but the first thing I actually want to do is solve the shape of all of these edges, just because later on it's going to be easier to manipulate them around if they're already in the correct shape. So this is pretty intuitive. I don't really have a specific strategy for this. Okay, we have all of the correctly shaped edges positioned on this side. Now let's take a look at this side. Oh, it looks like I actually got lucky and this side's also done. I mean, what you can actually have is just two of these swapped around in the wrong shape, but you just keep maneuvering them and eventually you'll get them into the right shape. At this point, what I want to do is actually pair them up to each other. So that would be, you see this and this, how they have the same colors. So I want all of them to look like that. Now there is the concern of pair storage, so that you don't mess up pairs that you've already made. And what I find most helpful is basically to do two next to each other like this, and then two more next to each other. And that way, when you make a 45-degree offset turn, you're not disturbing that specific set of pieces. So let's see what we have. We have green and yellow, green and yellow. We have this one also done, so let's do what I said earlier and put it next to that. Okay, and then they could just stay like that on the bottom layer, and let's pair up more of them, which all I do to pair them up is basically turn both layers by 45 degrees, make sure something is going to line up as a result, and then just keep doing that. Okay, so at this point we have most of them done. You can see that we have this done, this done, this done, this done. This is undone. And then we have one more right there. So we have two in total that are undone. There's three different types of situations you could get. You could get two of them that need swapping, you could get three of them that need a 3 cycle, or you can get 4 of them. 4 of them is the easiest because you can just, you know, they'll go together. 3 is a little harder because you kind of have to break up an already paired set and then kind of swap it in. And 2 is the most annoying. This is the closest thing I guess you could call to parity on this. And basically what I do for the parity is, like on any square 1 type puzzle, I need to make an odd amount of swaps. So you can see that if I were to turn this, that swaps twice, because that swaps with that and that swaps with that. So the only move that swaps an odd amount of times is actually if you were to take one layer and rebuild all of these pieces that are already solved, just one piece to the right, so 45 degrees off. So basically, you see how right now in this state everything's 45 degrees off? I need this to become the state where all the shape is correct. So it's not that annoying, but it's a little bit annoying. Okay, and now in terms of shape, we have just 2 and 2, and I do believe there is a way to reorient everything by 45 degrees without messing up the shape, but I haven't figured out exactly how to do that, so now I need to really quickly fix this shape, and then assuming I don't mess anything else up too hard, I should be all set to just pair everything up instead of having just 2 pairs left. Okay, after way too much fumbling, you can see that finally all of these pieces are in the correct shapes, and that means that once I start pairing them up by color, they should all come together instead of there being only 2 pairs left. And you can see that here we have probably the easiest setup where these and these need to swap, and also these and these need to swap. So we have to just make essentially one simple setup move and then it should be all good to go. Just have to make sure. Is that it? Yeah, and there we go. Everything is paired up. Excellent. My long-term plan is basically to convert this into a 3x3x2 solve, so I'm trying to reduce the entire puzzle to that. So the next step in achieving that is going to be to finally complete these triplets, which means I need the blue and yellow edge, the other one, and finally the blue and yellow 2 color corners, what I'm calling them. These are 2 color corners, these are 3 color corners. You might think, but wait, the corners are all mechanically identical. And that's what actually makes it not too bad to swap them around. All I really have to do is some setup moves to put 2 of them in opposite corners, and the way I'm going to swap them around is by using the cuboid algorithm. You can see here what it does. It swaps these 2 corners, but unfortunately it also swaps these 2 edges. But of course, this being a cuboid, it's actually trivial to swap those around. So the end result we want is just these 2 corners switched. And that's essentially how I'm going to solve the rest of the shape of this puzzle. I have to do some setup moves, and then those 2 algorithms in succession, and then undo any setup moves. So for example, let's actually look for the blue and yellow piece. It's here, so let's put that there, and then because we want them exactly 90 degrees away from each other, I'm going to put it here. So let's turn it like that, there, and now we just need to position them like 3x3x2 corners, there and there. One thing I want to say before actually going into the algorithm is it's a lot easier to lose your place on this than on a normal puzzle, because on a 3x3x2 it's obvious that you can only make 90-degree turns. But here you can make 45-degree turns, and if the puzzle isn't solved by shape, it can be kind of tricky to figure out where to stop. So anytime I do like a U move or a U2 move, I pick one piece that's aligned with the center layer, and then I try and position it where it should be after the turn, and that kind of helps me keep a frame of reference for where the pieces actually need to go. So right now I'm trying to swap this and this, and that's going to mess up these edges, so I'm going to have to turn it by 90 degrees and swap them around. Okay, and now we just have to look for whatever the setup move was. You don't ever need super complicated setup moves on this, so it should always just be a single turn back to the solved shape of these pieces. Okay, we've undone the setup moves, and now you can see the end result is that this triplet is now fully paired up. This blue and yellow two-color corner is positioned with its edges. So yeah, I'm actually not worried about the colors of the three-color corners right now, because those are trivial to fix later when I'm just solving this like a reduced 3x3x2. So for now, all I'm going to do is continue swapping around the two-color and three-color corners until all of these triplets are paired up. And finally, we have this back in the cuboid shape. You can see that everything is paired up into triplets, and now I can just solve this like a regular 3x3x2. And here we are, the Sun Cuboid is finally solved. That was really fun. Let's go over my final thoughts. In conclusion, the Sun Cuboid was actually pretty interesting to solve. It combines existing techniques with new concepts in an engaging manner, so I felt like it wasn't too difficult, but also a substantially new experience for me. I definitely recommend trying this puzzle out if you can. Thanks again to Marcell for posting the files, and thank you all for watching. Have a great day.